welcome to the Resilient Mental State Podcast. I'm Kyle Shepard, husband, father, and resilience instructor of over 10 years. Join me as I sit down with writers, independent thinkers, and extraordinary individuals to discuss their unique wisdom through the lens of resilience. Resilience is the ability to effectively manage and recover from stress. It is essential to endure and grow from life's inevitable adversities. Resilience is a skill that can be trained. Michael Woudenberg, my favorite mixed mental artist. I've known you now for a couple years, and when I first started digging into your Substack, Polymathic Being, and just blown away by what you can do with concepts and exploring diverse ideas, consolidating them, and coming up with practical conclusions. Your Substack is primarily nonfiction, but I learned you wrote a fiction book at that time, and there is a sequel to it, and you're working on the third edition in the Singularity series. The Singularity Chronicles. But I have your first book, Paradox, behind me. I've read a lot of fiction in my life, not as much these days. I keep forcing myself to read more and more because writers like you encourage it, and I always find a lot of value out of it, particularly entertained by it. But those fiction novels that you read that contain a lot of universal truths in them really resonate. That you sit on them, you think about them, and my goodness, brother, one of my favorite fiction books I've ever read is Paradox. So I'm glad I sat on it for a while after I bought it, because I got to read Polymathic Being a lot more and seeing how you weave in the things that you write about in nonfiction to this sci-fi novel, which is based on advancing AI. Two primary characters, Kira and Noah, they're siblings. Their mother is passing away, and spoiler alert, does pass away. And their father, who has created an advanced AI trying to work toward being sentient, uses her as a host. And so they diverge. Kira, following her father's path, works on sentient AI using her mother really to save her life because of her love for her, but also her advanced knowledge and thinking of technological progress. Whereas Noah, he leans more toward humanity. He leans more toward the analog, and he's part of a resistance movement that works against this advance in AI. And when I read it, it reminds me a lot of The Walking Dead. So fans of that show know it's a zombie thriller, but it's much more than that. It's about maintaining humanity in an environment that is a zombie apocalypse, but really these moral dilemmas that we face, regardless of the environment. That's exactly what happens in your book. And you wrestle with a lot of things without coming to the conclusions that you do in Polymathic Being. And you leave the readers up to kind of choosing which route they would go or what they would agree with. There is no right conclusion. My goodness, brother, that's what I want to talk to you about today. This book, Paradox. And I'm curious, it came out in 2023, but when did you start thinking about this premise? When did you start writing it, and why?
No, great. I love hearing that. And it's interesting. So you started the conversation with mixed mental artist. So, Paradox is the novelization of mixed mental arts. So it was, next week I'm going to be hiking up. I'm looking out my window, but there's a mountain range to the south here. So I'm in Tucson, Arizona, and it's called, the Santa Rita Mountains. And the biggest one is Mount Wrightson. So in Arizona, you think about Arizona as desert, but it's actually quite mountainous, specifically Tucson. I've got mountains all around, but the point is it's 9,000 feet there. I'm at about 3,000 feet. So about 6,000 feet of hiking. So I'm going to go hike that with my cousin again. And we've been doing this for years. We're going to hike it, like I said, next weekend. We spend the night, we're timing it and where it's the full moon and the sunset. And at that peak, what's fascinating about that is as the sun sets, you then turn and the moon rises. All right. There's a reason I shared that little weird anecdote is in 2018, we did that hike again. Like I said, we've been doing this for years. And as I was climbing up, I was part of a group at the time called Mixed Mental Arts, and it's now defunct. You can read. There's a essay I wrote called Triggered, which gets into the kind of the core nexus of why that group ended up dying. Simply put, they couldn't actually handle their own biases. They could read about them, they could kind of understand them, but they couldn't actually apply them internally. So I was sitting there thinking, man, I have all these, mixed mental arts that are really cool, but they're ethereal. they're just, big brain ideas and yada yada. It's like, okay, how do I make this a little bit more approachable? And that's where the idea is. We were hiking up, and I came up with the core concept of paradox hiking up, and then talking about it with my cousin and my friend Jeremy. And then when I got back down off the mountain, I wrote down the original outline, but then I sat on it for years because I'm like, okay, I'm trying to struggle with how do I put these things together? How do I get this stuff down? Everything else. My wife was finally like, you just write it. Like we're actually going it's early 2023, and I'm like, hey, just let's go through the outline again. She's like, it's good. Just start writing. I'm like, easy for you to say. Um so I finally sat down and started writing, and then and because and you mentioned it before, because I've been exploring a lot of these topics on um on my own nonfiction writing, paradox is where science fiction meets science facts. So you will find almost all the concepts in paradox are written about everything from elephant riding to, which is, chapter 20 is titled that. So that's kind of where the genesis came from.
And that was one of my favorite parts and why I'm thankful I sat on it for a little while, because to see how you weave in those things that you write on in Polymathic Being was so cool. And that really is the power of fiction. So one thing that you do very well, because you're obviously brilliant, you're a systems engineer, you teach engineering management, former ranger, you do all of these things that we talk about regularly offline, and all these different hats that you wear. You're on Space Force, you're standing up a program office, all this amazing stuff. And you could write very deeply on your areas of expertise if you wanted to and use a lot of big terms and show how brilliant you are. But one thing that you do very well in your nonfiction is you take these complex topics and then you draw from different sources, particularly competing sources of information, and then work through it in a way that is very easy for a simple minded individual like myself, or really anyone showing the success of your Substack, to absorb, to consider, and then to work on practically in their own lives. But even more so in a fiction novel, you tell a story, particularly an entertaining story. And there is no like, do this, do that. It is just, it purely is entertainment. But my favorite type of fiction is you don't realize you're learning
Mhm.
facts as you're reading fiction. And so it's cool that that's how it kind of came, and maybe that you sat on it the same way, because you've been writing on Substack for how long now?
I started in 2022, so I'm
Cool.
coming on 4 years now. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, you had a nice database not only of published articles, but the wild mind that you have, like we were just talking yesterday, you have the next 5 posts where you post every Sunday morning on deck already, and you're always developing new things. So I'm sure you had many ideas. I have 100 ideas of things that I could write about, but I don't have the discipline that you do to get them posts ready ahead of time.
Well, so I've been going week by week for a little bit, and it wasn't comfortable, so I decided to get some shit done. No, I find, so from a writer's perspective, I like getting ahead of the curve and getting them out because I feel like it a lot. Like I literally have been sitting on one essay for a few weeks. Actually, Kit and I wrote it together, and she's like, "When is it gonna come out?" And I'm like, I actually it's about personality again, right?" And I'm like, "I've written too much about personality. I need to break that cycle, and we'll push that one a little bit further into the future." So I actually ended up just recording that one yesterday, and I think we're queued up for, next week. But so we're sorry, a couple threads you pulled on that one. Within the storytelling, right? Within the tying the concepts together. So I write about, so what's fun about paradox in when writing it is you probably, if you pick a chapter, I can tell you the essay. So for instance, what is it? Chapter 3, eliminating bias, is actually a essay, eliminating bias in AI and ML. And I literally pulled it and put it in. And I'm like, "Oh, this is like crap, right? Like, how do I create a narrative around this?" Then I'm like, "Oh, I just tur it's," I'm like, "It sounds like a lecture." I'm like, "Well, let me just turn it into a lecture with," then that's where a character emerged that ended up becoming a character throughout the book. Um, and then, Can AI Be Creative was actually kind of a genesis. I wrote that one before I started writing the book. Actually, most of these I did. Um, and Can AI Be Creative was able to be woven into the narrative, like literally copy the essay, rip it apart, reformulate it. So instead of me describing it to you in that tone, it's Kira and her friends working it back and forth as a work team or a project team in college. So no, it's just I think that was the fun part about writing it was being able to take the writing that I'd already done, but make it even. You said it was approachable in my nonfiction, but trying to make it even more approachable in the fiction.
And it absolutely was. And like you have these different posts, but the way it weaves together into one continuous narrative and the build in that book, like I mean, AI is still relatively new. Of course, it's advancing rapidly, and we see all these amazing applications and what it's doing now, not only in supercomputers, but in robots and drones and in other things, and all these, I mean, really amazing life altering, world altering applications across every domain. And pros and cons to everything. And that's really what your book dives into, the trade-offs, the pros of AI and the cons of AI. And this is what your nonfiction writing does too. I told you this on our first podcast, that your posts on AI have been some of my favorite because they're not necessarily conclusive. You show it as a tool while still maintaining humanity, where some may delegate all of the thinking to AI or be completely resistant to it, stay out of my life altogether.
Mhm.
And of course, like anything else, whether it was the printing press, whether it was TV and news being delivered to your home, social media, all these things have trade offs. And it's really not what they are, but how and
Mhm.
why we use them. And that wrestling with now one of the main, and your book, yes, it's fictional, but man, it feels like future possibility,
Dude,
and sooner rather than later.
it's, the weird thing is, so it's aged very well. Um,
Yes.
and almost scarily so of where we're seeing it. Now, so I wanna flip the conversation a little bit. So, you talked about that tension and not having a decision. Or me not providing a decision, right? So,
Yes.
which side would you choose? Would you choose the Kira side, which is trying to upload human consciousness into AI, or would you pick the Noah side that wants us to be more naturalistic?
Yeah, man, it's so obviously Kira lost her mom. Noah lost his mom too. They lost their mom. So like the power of that love behind the why, you can empathize very quickly with both. I definitely fall towards Noah's side. You know me. I'm more analog. I'm more old school in a lot of ways, but I know the value of advancing technology. And when you talk about advancing AI, I'm all for it, and all the different ways that it can improve the world. When you start talking about sentient AI and the power that could potentially be displayed as you do in your book, and I have not read the second one yet. I'm it's in the queue. I'm looking forward to firing up, and I actually wanted to have this conversation before I did. And I know you take it to another level after that, and you're working on your third. But it's also like it's an unknown. So sentient AI, it's probably coming, whether I'm in favor
Mhm.
of it or not. But what that means for humanity, which is the main question of your book, like how do you maintain humanity in a world of advancing AI, potentially sentient, where we're merging with technology in more ways than ever? And I'm definitely of the Noah mindset. And man, the more we tip toward AI doing a lot of the work, how can we maintain that humanity? I mean, but
Well,
you see his evolution and his thinking too in your book, and I'm
right.
curious for how to continue.
So for the listeners, there's this idea that you've got these tech bros out there now where it's like my AI is conscious, right? And you're like, no, it's not. And so this
Yeah.
is fundamentally what paradox. So let me actually flip this to a question. So as you read it, the idea fundamentally is the sentient AI is a human consciousness uploaded as the AI. So the AI provides the framework, the human consciousness gets uploaded. That's really what carries forward into book two.
Right.
Is then so the tagline there is separated from a human body can or separated from a physical body can humans overcome their limitations.
Right.
The
Like,
first book's tagline is, "In the battle over advanced AI, will we lose our humanity or learn what truly makes us human?" So you're really big on the physical fitness, the physiology, everything else. What did you learn about the human body and brain regarding the implications of creating a human consciousness that you didn't know before?
yeah, I mean, you and I have talked a lot about like empathy versus sympathy and different ways that we like where emotions come from. And we have a lot of overlap. We probably have some differences and we won't turn this podcast into those differences. But like the elephant riding, I'm a big fan of the metaphor. And I really appreciate how you can like apply that to your own life and think about it. But like where our emotions come from and how you create them. A lot of good evidence
Let's
that
let's pause let's pause really quick.
yep,
Let's kind of explain the elephant riding. So,
yep,
elephant riding is from the Jonathan Haidt book, The Happiness Hypothesis.
yep,
So this isn't so another fun fact, if you go to the singularitychronicles.com, you're gonna find a rabbit hole where you're gonna find paradox and integration and soon to be rebirth, but then you're going to find all of the nonfiction books behind me that influenced it: Jonathan Haidt, Anthony Damasio, Daniel Kahneman. I mean, all the classics that are
yep,
out there, right? But then you're also going to find the essays that take and weave that all together. So it's like three layers. You've got the nonfiction, the true fiction, and then in the middle is the fusion of the two. All right. So that said, the we were talking about the human consciousness and
yep,
the elephant riding. Thank you.
yep,
So elephant riding um is from Jonathan Haidt, and it basically says humans are like the rider on an elephant. The rider is your logic or your rationale, and the elephant are your emotions. And so if you think Robert Heinlein, another science fiction author, says man is not a rational animal, man is a rationalizing animal. And so that's the core function of the elephant rider, is that we are a rational rider on an emotional elephant. And too often what you see on social media is that the elephants are stampeding. You've got pink elephants on parade stampeding all over, and the riders willy-nilly pretending that I'm a rational actor, and you're like, "No, no, no. No, you're stampeding through the jungle, Joker," right? But understanding that core, and that's where, chapter 20, kind of one of the core nexus is solving the quandary of AI from hyper-rational into that balanced human is the fusion of the elephant and the rider. The AI was the rider only, and it actually needed the injection of the elephant to make it work. Anyway, sorry.
yeah.
Um, just so the audience understands when you talk about the elephant and the rider, and I'll hand it back to you now.
I appreciate you doing that because I make these assumptions sometimes because I know your work so well and you've written on elephant riding and talked about it in other podcasts, but it's worth explaining that. And obviously, in the novel, Mother, she, like you said, initially she's just the rider, and then the emotions come in, and then that creates another dilemma. So finding that merge for what truly is human consciousness and humanity and technology. To your initial question, like what did I learn from the book? I mean, I know this from real life already. What machines are going to be capable to do and are doing already is far beyond our human capacity. And that's been true of all time. That's why we use physics and other tools to do things that we just physically cannot do. And we use those tools very well. Ration and delineating ration for like reason from rationalizing is so important. And I love how you do that, talk on it and write about it and weave that into your book. And I couldn't agree more. I'm very much influenced when it comes to our psychology and how we operate, particularly in the realm of emotions, by the work of Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. So, how Emotions Are Made is one of her books, her first book, and then 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. And it's very much like emotions are rational because our brain is a predicting mechanism. So, based on past experience, it makes these predictions in our environments. And physiologically, before we even realize, things are happening in our body to prepare us for what we think is coming next. And
Mhm.
then conceptually, yeah, if we just lean on our assumptions, we may be rationalizing and getting away from what was rational before we reframe, interject, and create new experiences. And I leverage that quite a bit in my writing and thinking now in my own life for how can I almost psychologically and physiologically build a more resilient mental state regardless of
Yeah.
the environment. And to
No,
do that in technology, I think you can, but with emotions, it becomes challenging. So I learned that there's so much in your book to learn about, like, not only technology, but the fusing of
mhm,
psychology with technology, and I'm sure many things that are being done already in different, when you talk about machine learning and different
mhm.
applications of AI, it's fascinating to see the considerations that could go into it. But when it comes to consciousness, I'm definitely skeptical and have reservations, very much like Noah.
No, that's it's interesting, and actually, you've when I look away, my brain's spinning because you talked about emotions being rational, and I'm thinking about it. First, I'm like, wait, what? And then I'm like, okay, never mind. However, so your AI, your LLM, is very rational, right? It says, here's my predication of the next letter, right? Now we're getting more sophisticated in how we stack those together, but the AI is very rational. Yet the AI can still hallucinate, right? Hallucinate, right?
Yep.
But the point is it can
Yep.
error based on that prediction, and that's kind of a large way. That's so when we think about irrationality of emotion, it's not that. I mean, you look outside, you watch the animals running around. They don't have reason. They're not rationalizing. Be like, I think, therefore I am. They're like emotion. They are just boom, 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 reacting, and it works. There's a lot of animals out there surviving day for day. Um, so that's an interesting one. However, when that errors, when if you think about a dog that gets, the emotions get mistrained and you raise your hand and it cowers or doesn't like men or whatever, right? You can mistrain a dog, mistrain the emotions of a dog. We can see that very handily, but that's still not unreasonable or irrational. It makes sense based on their previous predictions. That's
Yeah.
actually an interesting insight. I hadn't really. Now you've given me a thread I need to pull into book 3. Thank you.
Let's go. Yeah, and you said it very well. So it's just learned behavior. So it's no
Mhm,
longer irrational because that's what you know. That's what you're doing. Anything you do, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And not necessarily better conceptually, but adapted to what you've been doing. So all of our emotions are predicated on past experience, those predictions, and what we continue to do. And if we're doing it subconsciously, it's probably going to be less than ideal
mhm.
unless we've reached that enlightened state, or like all those other things people talk about. I'm skeptical of that even too, when it comes to humans.
Yep.
And I like humanity. I like being human, and so that's why you'll keep hearing the Noah in me being resistant to it. But the irrational would be like, you actually just explain it in a way that, like, it's not no longer irrational, but excess. It would, when it becomes like
Un un
irrational.
un and this goes more into kind of what I read about a lot is it's like, un uninspected,
Yeah,
right, is where you get a problem. So, a lot of what the issue so fun fact of one of the chapters is called, an autoimmune response. And so, right before COVID, um, this was, early February 2020, I was in Phoenix for what we call threat casting. And threat casting is where you figure out how to kill billions of people. So, fun fact, Paradox itself is fundamentally a threat casting novel. What could go wrong? And the unrecognized emotions is where I'm going with this one is so we're looking at how you could create mass devastation using biological warfare. And we're like, well, the goal isn't necessarily to kill millions of people. That would result in if I was an adversary, that would result in a hot war. I just want to delegitimize. I want to reduce the economic and political standing of an adversary nation is really what I want to go do is that's the nature of war. So how do I do that without getting it reciprocated? And we're like, well, why don't you deploy something, a biological agent or some nature that is measurable, dangerous to a small population set, but then what you're trying to do is not kill people, but trigger a societal autoimmune response was the term we coined at the time. Then COVID hit like a month later, and we're watching this. We're like, oh my God. I'm not saying COVID was a biological agent released by an adversary. What I'm saying is the truth of a societal autoimmune response is absolute. You can absolutely see that happening. And so that's one of the things that I leverage because so when we talk about emotions and the elephant stampeding, the societal autoimmune response is getting a lot of elephants to stampede. So I'm sitting there with the book and I've got the adversarial relationship between advanced AI and the humans. And I'm like, okay, how do I kill billions of humans most effectively? And I'm like, I'm thinking technology, I'm thinking, rods from God, I'm thinking all this stuff that the AI could do to go kill people. And then I'm like, okay, easiest way to kill a lot of humans is to give them the excuse to do it themselves. And all the AI had to do in Paradox was get these elephants to stampede.
And the creative ways that Mother did that, and the AI systems were able to deploy different types of weapons, more psychological, of course. It was hot as well and physical, and there were some wild chapters that demonstrated that. But why I like the analogy of elephant riding is exactly what you just said. It's when the emotions become so excessive at an individual or societal level that to get that elephant back in line, it's very hard to get control of that and to start rewinding. And so when we talk about like anger versus fear versus happiness,
Hmm.
excess demonstration of all of those gets you away from reason. So the again, the symbology of that and really thinking about, but also the excessive lack of emotions is equally concerning. If you're
Yep.
unimpacted by significant events like loss, like death, that would be equally concerning. And that wasn't true of Noah. Kira,
Mm.
of course, was very impacted by it. Noah was just impacted in a different way. So neither had complete lack of emotional response, but they were just quite different. And so then we start thinking about what truly is progress, what truly is humanity, and how do you maintain
Right, right.
your humanity in advancing AI or just an unknown world, which we're kind of living in right now in reality.
Right. So you say you take the Noah side. So I'm trying to not no spoilers, but what
Yes.
was your thought on Noah's role in actually creating what he was wanting to avoid?
Loved that chapter. Loved how that happened there because we talk about diverse perspectives. And so we have one group that sees things a certain way and trying to figure it out. Another individual comes in, unintentionally sees things from a different perspective and solves a puzzle. And it's the power of diversity, the power of diverse thought, but not in differentiating us, but finding the overlap to truly have progress, but at the same time, resistance to things that are beyond what are truly progress for humanity. That is the dilemma. That is the paradox in your book. But his evolution, not only in response to the different adversities that came his way throughout the novel, but just really in his willingness to embrace certain aspects, willingness to continue resisting. And you see this both in Kira and Noah in different ways throughout. And it just, again, it resonates so much with, I assume, everyone who's read your book, but
Yeah.
particularly me, because I wasn't thinking this side is bad, this side
Right,
is
right.
good. There was not that.
Well, it's interesting because so when I first started writing it, I thought it was going to be, an adversarial, like truly adversarial relationship. But as I was writing, I'm like, but they're brother and sister. Right? They have a common love of their mother and their father Jasper, right? They have and Jasper plays a significant role. He's kind of the founder of Gaia Innovations, who Kira's working for. So Jasper and Kira are working together, and Noah's working with a different group. But it was interesting because there's a phrase I heard right when I kicked off the book, and for the love of all things holy, I can't attribute it, so I'll just claim it now. But it's that good writing should surprise the author.
Yeah.
And I will tell you what, writing Paradox was a constant surprise. If you think I intended half of those twists, if you think I had, I have this wall plotting out all of this stuff, right? There is no way I could have planned for half of the plot twists that occurred in there. I was writing along and I'm like, oh, oh crap, right? Let me go get that, right? And so the relationship between Kira and Noah was one of the biggest surprises that came out of the book as I wrote it because I think they held their relationship as brother and sister very well in a non-antagonistic but differing perspective way. And then I almost feel bad for Noah. I do feel bad for Noah. I'm like, "Oh my god." Like, you're on all your best intentions, you actually kind of unlocked the thing you feared the most,
Yeah.
fundamentally because he and others didn't recognize the true layers of what it meant to be human and what the implications were.
Yeah, it's to get philosophical for a second, like, obviously, it's based around a family, and
Mhm.
differences in opinion in this family end up influencing not only the country, but the world, because of the knowledge that they have and what Jasper created. And it, like the duality, not only of the repercussions of that advancing AI, but all the beautiful things that came from it too. So again, good
Mhm.
versus bad.
Well,
Um,
they saved their mother. Salil is a sentient AI in
yeah,
full in the end, it's her full who she is
yeah.
was saved. So they managed to overcome death. Now, sorry,
No,
continue.
you're good. I wanna come back to that because
Okay.
whether they saved their mother or not is a great question to sit on when it comes to, did that actually happen?
Did
I
they?
Is sentient AI uploaded consciousness post-death, like, and playing God in that way, is that will that downstream effect of being able to do that be one of the things that actually kills humanity too? Because now if we know that is possible at a human level, does that change what being human is when we're alive? If we know we actually are not dying from a spiritual level on this earth. So regardless of your religion, your belief system, doesn't matter if you're buying into the system. And if you're not buying into the system, that's going to cause some struggles as well. So that's a fun thing to play with. And again, I haven't read the second novel and how you
Yeah, yeah.
play with the third. It'd also be really interesting, brother, to see your initial outline for what you alluded to before and all the surprises that you had while writing it. So, like, what your outline was, having been a reader of the book now, to see, like,
Mm,
here's the outline, and then that's what was created. Um, yeah.
that'll be
So,
interesting. You'll yeah, you'll get a spoilers for book 4 if it comes out.
but the philosophical point was you make it about a family, but you can look at every human being in this world, and we're all born children. And don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, evil exists. I believe that wholeheartedly. But even those evil individuals that have lost their minds and their souls so much to where now their orientation is to cause chaos, is to cause as much harm as possible while they're still alive. I mean, what a travesty, because you know that used to be a baby. But regardless of that, you think of most people in this world trying to do the best they can with what they have. And even when you significantly differ in opinion of what that good is, or what the most important things are, your book does that, where it expands out of the family. And now you start seeing all of these different individuals around the world becoming involved in the story, directly, very quickly, but also just indirectly as it expands. And the ties that we all have together as human beings. And then something as conceptual as sentient AI, it's it's a tough one. And so coming back to death, and if they saved their mom or not, I'm sure it quite felt like it, but I'm still not sure they did.
That's a okay, so that's where oh, there's so many layers on that one. So we're getting into book 2 on that one a little bit. So, all right, so book 2 was interesting. So book 2 is, integration. So basically, the tagline, like I said before, is, separated from from a physical body, can humans overcome their limitations? So it really was an interesting way to grapple. So you've got now, so no spoilers, so there we go, there's book 2. There's, no spoilers, but, so at the end of the book, there's, you've already learned billions die, you now have to figure out how I managed to achieve that one. But the humans decide to split. So the AI decides to pack up and leave
Yep.
and go into space, and the humans decide to reset, and they decide to reset to kind of what I call the Middle Bronze Age. So think about 4,000 years ago. All right. So integration picks up almost immediately after paradox. Rebirth that I'm writing right now picks up 2,000 years later, but it's weird because it's actually 2,000 years kind of in the past. So,
Yeah.
but it's following the humans and how they're trying to reset and rebirth and overcome the foibles of the past. So that's the one I'm writing right now. Oh, so fun fact on that one. One of the characters' names is lame.
Ah, like that.
So
I like
now
that.
I'm prepping you here because we all know our good friend Sam. So he writes about pre-civilization, prehistorical cultures, and so I've been leveraging a lot of his work to write Rebirth to the point that he has this essay about the Mandan Indians and an initiation ritual. So I asked and got permission to take that essay, extract it, and then put it in. And so there's a character named after him for that. Thanks, but also um, it's a this is funny. It's Valkyrie Ranger because Sam's a SEAL and I'm a Ranger. So I gave the Ranger the wrong title but the right name. So there's jokes all over if you understand the people that work with it. Anyway, what I worked that in about the initiation rituals that go on there. All right. So the reason I share that one is because as you get into integration, there are a lot of Easter eggs in there. If you understand the Substack community that I'm in the orbits of, there are characters named after people from real life. There are situations that are extracted from conversations that happened on Substack notes. There's a character, one of the main antagonists or like suit. There's the main antagonist, Odysseus, and then there's the kind of a cohort in there. One of those characters is named after a person that I engaged with on Substack Notes who is so absurd that I literally took screenshots of the conversation and took their literal exactly what they said and put that into the dialogue because I could not make it any more absurd. So just
Wow.
fun little things on that. Anyway, so segue on that one, but there's a lot of fun little threads that weave in there. But fundamentally, it's an exploration. So the rebirth, that's where I was going with this with Sam and everybody. Rebirth is trying to follow the humans and see if they can actually reset. So if you don't like where we're at right now, rebirth is exploring if you could reset, could we? Okay. Integration then follows the AI as they go off. Now, these are human consciousnesses that are uploaded into the AI architecture, into these spaceships, basically, and trying to figure out like what does it mean to be a human if you don't have a body. So there's a lot of essays that I wrote in preparation for this one, like on the feminine, on or a lot on the feminine specifically, rediscovering the goddess, all these other things. Because so you think about it, just male and female. So okay, rip your consciousness out. What does it mean to be a woman? Is there anything? So Kira is a woman. Kira is now in mother, right? So mother is an AI. What does it mean to be a woman? Is there something unique about femininity that can remain or needs to remain when you no longer have a body? Do you just become a neutral agent, almost an NPC? So what does race matter? Like, what does my cultural upbringing, does being black have something more than just skin color? Now, I'm not in this, it gets into a weird way because people are like, well, you know, everybody bleeds red. Well, correct. However, there's implications on that I think are important from a diversity perspective, even when it comes to the way your brain works, the way your endocrine system, all your hormones work. There's a unique pattern, and we explore that one in Paradox, but then trying to bring that into integration. So you don't have that body. What do you do? What do you do with that uniqueness that is imprinted on you because you had a body? That's kind of the main thrust of what we're trying to explore in integration.
Interesting. And one of the many things I love about your writing is you take not only a wide range of topics, but particularly uncomfortable topics. And whether it's sometimes I know you do this intentionally with your headlines, but other times unintentionally, you'll have something on like what is femininity or
Mhm.
does race matter? These are not names of actual posts. I'm just coming up with ideas.
Yep.
And of course, you're a white man, so people jump to conclusions right away. And the comments or the things that you'll share where people clearly didn't read your post, but they jump to these conclusions about them where you're very nuanced, you're very charitable, you're very well thought out in how you write about these issues. And again, you source from all kinds of areas outside of yourself, particularly those uncomfortable areas for different writers and experts, quote unquote, in those areas to see kind of what's been done so far as you wrestle through that. And then you don't give, once again, complete objective answers, absolute truth answers, but
Well, is there
you,
are
you
there?
that's a great question. I'm not sure of that, as you know very well. And to know that you're doing that integration for AI, very interesting. And I'm looking forward to seeing where you go with it. And then now
So
you're talking about rebirth and weaving in individuals like Sam. And you mentioned when people ask me, like, where should I go when they find his account from a recommendations ours or whatever, it's that. So I have to kind of know the person first because that's jumping in the deep end with some of his work with the rituals that he wrote about, the
okay.
piece you alluded to. But he has so many like that, and that is without question top 5 for me, if not number 1, when
Mhm.
I meet somebody who I know won't be,
Well,
too
it's
turned off by jumping in the deep end.
well, and his stuff is Sam's stuff is so powerful from the visceral,
Yeah,
right? Navy SEAL, and I can, coming from my time in the Army, he did a lot more. He's been there, done that, and I feel like a Boy Scout, right?
yeah,
Um, but it resonates because it is visceral, and I've been there in a degree, and I know what he's talking about, and I look around us, like, well, the essay I just wrote recently on becoming a man, right, and how. Y y
so good.
but we don't have any, like, boys don't have challenge.
Yeah,
And then you read about, and I brought in, Sam's the work on the Mandan Indians, and what those boys were put through on the initiation ritual. I mean, I'm not saying that we should go, you know, do the hooks and pull them out with buffalo skulls and all that stuff. Like, I don't, it's funny because, you know, but doing hard things, you could do going back to your resiliency, right? You're always harping about the resiliency in the best of ways, and we are incredibly resilient. But right now, one of the biggest critiques I have about society is we are not challenging specifically our boys to become men, and so we have a lot of adult-bodied boys
yeah,
running around thinking, LARPing like Andrew Tate. And they have no idea, and this is where I love Sam's work, and that's why I wanted to integrate it into, integrate but, weave it into Rebirth because it's so powerful for what we need in this world.
and in that piece that you just alluded to that you wrote, in Becoming a Man, very much sounds like ideas behind your 3rd book, Rebirth, because you talk about, um, conceptual death and rebirth, whether that's through rituals, whether that's through aspects of
Mhm,
being a boy and becoming a man, but it requires some death of some certain, at least mindsets and approaches to the world, and
mhm,
definitely avoidance of challenge or not, and the beauty of adversity and what can bring. And like you said, we don't need to go full throttle on some of the rituals that have been done in the past, but there's power behind that. And why Sam's writing is so visceral is because it is about real human experiences, things that either have been done or still done to this day. And when you
mhm,
consider the extremes of human life and what has come from that, whether that is in war, whether that is in ancient tribes or rituals of any kind,
mhm,
it's visceral because it's real. And so that's
mhm,
where I default to Noah and his strong intention of remaining real because while it is so interesting to consider, the conceptual, the sentient AI, is it real anymore? Is it so far from human that I understand it could go on and live forever and do all these amazing things, but our species maybe becomes no more, or at least a hybrid, and now it doesn't
yeah.
feel as visceral.
So there is an element with I don't it definitely comes through, and certainly echoes of that come through in integration. I didn't hit that as hard as you are right now. And I'm almost, I look back, I'm like, that would have been a decent thread to have pulled there a little bit. It is something that they wrangle with, but it would have been nice in one way. It's like, man, if I had had Sam's writing when I wrote integration, I probably would have been a little bit more visceral on that one. But really, integration is exploring, like that book actually. Paradox was, easy to write because it's a contemporary science fiction.
Yeah.
um, Integration is more pure science fiction, and it fought me a lot more because the hardest part is, how do you write a book about a half a dozen characters when they are bits and bytes in servers, right? So that was it. So one of the critiques I had was, show don't tell. I'm like, you do realize if I were to show something, it would literally just be electrons, right? Like
Not the ones and zeros.
that's it. That's just binary. It's just basic, machine language. However, so I have to create these abilities for them to kind of create simulations and other things to kind of instantiate as a in a way with their formerly corporal bodies to be able to because one of the fun ones about that one is okay with a lot of the emotions shrug, right, head cock, right, different things that you can do to kind of show emotion. Okay, how do you do that if you don't have a body? So that's where I had to in integration, I actually had to they create a simulation. They have their spaces that they can kind of instantiate into a more, you know, synthetically corporal form to be able to add back emotion into the story. That was the hardest part was trying to figure out like I'm sitting there writing. I'm like, this book is fighting me, not because I don't know what I want to write about, but trying to put it into a way that would actually resonate like a book purely about AI that is like conscious AI that is going to resonate with people with corporal bodies. That was the weirdest twist of trying to write that one.
Well, I'm glad you tackled it and not me, brother. But I would imagine that in the characters that chose to go that route and upload themselves and then leave Earth, as you alluded to, happens where there's a separation. You have a lot of character development in those individuals. So I think that's going to add some visceral components to that reading. And then you also set the foundation and kind of how this is built. And you don't go too deep down those rabbit holes, but I learned a lot about technology and AI and machine learning and just considerations that go into this. And again, you have a lot of expertise in this area in your real life. And so to
Mhm.
write on in that way, I felt like I was learning things. And don't get me wrong, in my job, I work with experts in those realms, but I'm very green there. I
Yeah.
understand it conceptually. I find the overlap and at the levels I'm operating at to support it. But man, it definitely felt like I was reading stuff that helped me in my life, not only personally when it comes to
Mhm.
consideration of AI, but also professionally. So I think I would imagine you set the foundation well for where you take it with integration and now talking about rebirth, which I didn't know that we talk all the time, but I didn't know the title was that, and I didn't know some of the uh, applications of your recent posts. And I knew you were considering other people like Sam out there for characters and whose works, but that makes me really excited. And the timeline extremely interesting too. It's like you said, civilization on Earth was kicked back to about 4,000 years from where we are
Mhm.
right now. AI, sentient AI takes off, and integration is about the AI after they take off. But then rebirth will come back 2,000 years later. So really around zero of our timeline, I would imagine. So, and
Right. It's about
yeah,
it's kind of think like high Roman.
yep, yep. So a few years BC or a few years AD around there. And just how what a cool way to open up a third book in that way and see where you take that. I'm
So
excited.
this is what this so the book 3 was it's I don't it's almost like a fantasy adjacent. They're like alternative history, but not because it's 2,000 years in the future. So post-apocalyptic sci-fi is probably the best genre to put it in. But yeah, I go from AI on the one side that fought me, and now I'm talking about, they're riding horses and using spears, and they don't have any technology, no advanced, digital technology. So it's gonna be fun is the idea I have for book 4, which would be the working title is Hope, is is kind of it's gonna kind of fuse the 2 threads together, eventually be another almost 2,000 years further, but think like, uh, late 18, early 1900s, almost a steampunk vibe,
Mhm.
um, that'll start working in technology and things of that nature, kind of that, kind of combination of the Industrial Revolution slash, scientific revolution, Renaissance area kind of, adaptation in there. So that's the mental target. But I should probably actually finish writing Rebirth, which from a writer's perspective, we talked about this before we came live, is so I got about 16 chapters done, and I binge write. So You say, how do I get 5 essays ahead? Well, it's because I sit down and I have a bunch of thoughts and drafts. I have, 150 drafts going at any given time. But I'll sit there and get them working, then finally a whole slew of them will kind of clump together and I'll get them done. And then I schedule them out so that way I can binge again later. So my writing is like that. So Paradox I wrote in about 6 weeks.
Wow.
Probably let's say 8 weeks.
Wow.
22 chapters, 8 weeks. Um, and, uh, and that one was and then that was just the core writing and then going back and editing. So the fun fact about Paradox as well, though, is so I wrote it, and then my wife was going through and doing editing, and she's finally like, "Okay, hold on. You finish, go back and start re-editing." So there's a lot of stuff that we ripped out and things like that, but what I did, though, is I got to about chapter 11 on my editing pass. I'm like, "Oh, I found my voice." Just in the style and the tone and the tenor and everything else that goes with it, I found my voice around chapter 11. So what I did is I would edit chapter 11, go back, edit chapter 1, and then 12, 2, 13, 3, and I would pull the voice back to make sure from beginning to end, it felt the same as we went through. Um, Integration, I wrote in, it's 18 chapters I wrote in 21 days. And I sat down over Christmas break and I just nailed it out. Um, and then the editing that goes with that afterwards. Then Rebirth, the first 16 chapters I wrote in about 24 days. But then I got off the bandwagon and I need to get back on. I literally just probably need to take some PTO and lock myself in my room and knock out the next 4 chapters.
Hop
But
back on that hop back on that literary elephant and ride it. My goodness, to produce that amount of work and that quality of work in that short amount of time, again, just another thing that astounds me about you, brother.
well, it's and I don't mean that this this not intended to be a flex in that one. It's just, different strokes for different folks.
Of course.
Like some people do, I write an hour a day. And for me, the reason I fell off the bandwagon is when I get it and I'm working with it and I'm writing it and I'm playing with those characters all day, every day, it flows. When the hardest part right now is I actually have to luckily I'm at a break. I'm actually at a functional break in the book where it's kind of the penultimate I hit, and now we're building up and we're going to go into the final conclusive phase. So it was actually a good time to kind of break, but I almost have to reread the first 16 chapters now
Sure.
and then go and pick it up and just haul with it. But um another fun fact, Rebirth is fundamentally a heroine's journey.
Oh,
Um
nice.
so that's kind of a little insight into what the story is wrangling around, is not the hero's journey, but the heroine's journey and what that means and from a different perspective.
And Paradox was kind of that too, of course, through Kira, but also Hero's Journey through Noah. And
Yeah.
so
I would say
simultaneous.
Paradox was more of a overall hero's journey.
Yeah.
Even and Kira even went through her own version of that one as well.
Yeah. You wrote a recent piece on, I can't remember if you said different personalities and approach to AI or just different kind of perspectives on AI.
Mhm.
And obviously, this is a newer piece, so much after your release of Paradox. But I would have to imagine those thoughts were already within you as you were writing the different characters. I'm not remembering off the top of my head. You had like four primary ones and then two kind of undesirable ones.
You're talking you're talking the title I believe is AI a reflection of you.
Yes.
And so how
Yes.
your use and or your reaction to AI is less about AI. And I'm really glad you brought that up because when I watch people's reaction, there's another essay called Looking into a Mirror. And it took me years to kind of figure this one out, but when I'm writing online and everything else and I see people reacting to me, I'm like, who do you see? Or do you see me? And then I realized no, because what they're looking at is a mirror.
Yep.
They're seeing themselves acting if they were in my position. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's a tell not on me. That's a tell on you. Now, I always really work to introspect, make sure that I'm not missing something. I don't just absolutely assume that, you just don't know me, right? But with, because there's critique that I need, absolutely, but, so I take what lands, and then I realize, actually, you're looking to a mirror, like, okay, I don't need to deal with that. So anyway, back to AI though, is absolutely the way people react to it is less about the thing and more about so much of who you are and your understanding, like, okay, I write fiction. I work in the creative world. The absolute shocking levels of ignorance from the creative people about what creativity is. Like, what is creativity? And that was, something I explored in Can AI Be Creative? And what you find out in the exploration is humans also aren't that creative, right? We stand on the shoulders of giant. We are derivatively creative. We are not uniquely, in fact, we don't like uniqueness very much. We like, what is a plot twist? A plot twist takes a common trope that you're expecting and twists it. So you have to stand on the legitimacy of a common trope to be able to add a twist of uniqueness to make that plot twist. And that's something that's interesting. So what's creative? Like, paradox is creative. But paradox, we talked about, stands on the shoulders of giants. It stands on the psychology, and it stands on the theology, and it stands on the technology, and it stands on all these things. I have an entire spreadsheet that shows all of the influences that go in there. We talk about, like, how I'm creatively using Sam's work in Rebirth,
Mm.
but it requires me borrowing Sam's work to make it creative. Anyway, going back, the reflection of the AI being a reflection, so many times when you see these reactions, you're realizing that it's a reflection of the person responding, and it shows so much about where they are on their own journey of understanding who they are as humans. And sadly, there are so many people who are kind of blithely ignorant of what it truly means to be human. And that, going all the way full circle, is why I wrote the damn book. Is, in the battle over advanced AI, will we lose our humanity or learn what truly makes us human? And we lose our humanity when we don't understand what makes us truly human.
Nice. And another thing that makes us truly human is that AI won't be able to do is grow an amazing beard like you have right now for people that are able to watch this conversation. The first time we talked, you had a beautiful beard. Holy cow, bro. This is down to your solar plexus now. How long you been working on that thing?
1 year.
1 year.
So
Man.
it was a little, I'm a little heavy on the year. So it was a fun story. I went to a threat casting event, like we talked about earlier, in DC about a year ago. And this guy, Brian David Johnson, who does threat casting and future casting and everything, great guy. Um, Very creative fellow as well. He normally has a really good sized beard, and he was giving me shit last year. So I was like, "Well, oh, fine, screw it, let's go do this." And then I just didn't stop. And the problem is, I've actually hit, he- epic status. Um, and it's like, I've not normally grown a beard like this, and now I'm like, the problem is, when we first started talking, you're like, I'm being known for my beard. I'm like, oh, damn it.
I want to end this awesome conversation with a question, an uncomfortable question for you.
Yeah.
So, faced with a child's death, would you, if you had that choice that Kira had, upload that child's consciousness to a sentient AI?
You know, it was funny. I was going to ask you the same question about your wife. Um,
I'm no on the answer to me. At this point in my life, my answer is no.
the best part about Paradox is the title, right?
Yeah,
And I don't know which side I'd choose. I wrote it.
yeah.
I wrote both sides. So I can't actually answer your question because there are so many variables that go with it, right?
Mhm.
Because I could absolutely see myself going forward with the AI into integration, and I could absolutely see myself resetting and letting go of all this stuff and going back to, you know, not pre-civilization, but pre-technology. I could see both of those. So the I really don't have an answer. There's no, that's the thing. Like, if you walk away from paradox thinking you have an answer,
Yeah.
right? Versus, I appreciate an inclination versus a hard answer. But if you walk away with a firm answer, I think this is not the intent of the book. The intent of the book is you to walk away and be like, well, at least I know a lot more about myself, but holy hell, I am a lot less confident in the state of the world and the state of who we are. So I'm going to defer. I really don't know. I'm going back and forth, and I can make an equal case for both ways. I would say the one thing I would advise on that one that I think is a struggle that I never really dove into too hard with Mother, with Salil, is she didn't have the. I guess she did have the choice. She decided to do it. It would be a requirement. Would I want that for my child? The bigger question is, would my child want that? That would be the main thing, is it would have to be their decision whether or not they would be uploaded. And we actually deal with that. One of the characters in integration didn't have the choice, and that does have consequences in the book within the first 3 chapters. So we do struggle with that one a little bit. What happens if you get uploaded against your will? So sorry.
No.
All that to say, the best part about Paradox is it legitimately makes me stumble over my own answer to what you would think would have been a simple question, because it is a paradox.
Well, that's why the book reads so well, because you provide powerful cases for both sides of that question. And your genuine answer that you just gave me is absolutely uh, respectable, because you are the author of that book, and that's why it reads so damn well. And there's so many considerations into that. So you heard me say my answer is no right now, but I don't know is the true answer. So say that we're confident until we get met with a decision like that potentially in our futures. Very challenging when it comes to the people that we love most in this world. And there's so many other ways that we could take that question, like if it were a child versus a grown woman. Now we're talking about a life's experience versus a child's experience. How does that child, quote unquote, after it becomes sentient AI, age? And is that aging AI really that child anymore, or really the AI's predictions, responses? Like, there's so many interesting things. So, like, do you just keep that consciousness at that age of that individual that passed away? So many other ways you could potentially pick, hopefully countless books that you write in this series. And I will be uploading, of course, to the summary of the podcast, links to both of these books. I'm putting Paradox back up because that, of course, your first. Singularity Chronicle is your website. Like you said, you have tons of resources for the source of inspiration that led to the first book. Your Substack is outstanding. These books, I'm glad I waited as long as I did, but I'm glad I didn't wait any longer, because I'm not kidding when I say, man, one of the best fiction books I've ever read in my life. I'm stoked to read the second now, definitely because of this conversation today, and maybe even more so because of the premise of it and how it aligns with things that I love. The third, you're incredible, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to have the conversation with me, and I look forward to what's coming next.
No, absolutely looking forward to it. And now I'm gonna go kick myself in the butt and finish Rebirth. So
Heck
thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. Remember, all the knowledge in the world means little unless you uniquely apply it to your life. Challenge yourself to take action. Knowledge applied is wisdom earned. Determine what is important to you and get after it with intention, effort, and consistency. Until next time, stay resilient, my friends.